Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are cracking open the absolute master vault of human connection, emotional intelligence, and interpersonal power. Let us talk about a silent, devastating virus that is quietly destroying your relationships, sabotaging your career negotiations, and keeping you trapped in a loop of toxic arguments and internal resentment. We live in a world that teaches us to communicate through competition, judgment, and hidden aggression. From the time we are children, we are trained by society to analyze who is right and who is wrong, to label people who disagree with us as bad or defective, and to use blame, guilt, and demands to get what we want. But let us be completely honest with each other. Where does that old way of talking actually leave you? It leads straight to defensive walls, broken partnerships, chronic misunderstandings, and a deep, exhausting sense of emotional isolation. When you attack someone with judgment, they do not hear your pain or your request. They only hear the assault, and their primitive brain instantly enters a fight or flight survival frame. They either lash back with defensive anger or shut down completely, sealing off any possibility of real connection. Today, we are doing a massive, immersive storytelling breakdown of a book that provides a complete psychological blueprint to escape this matrix of conflict and claim total dominion over your emotional reality. Nonviolent Communication, a Language of Life, by world-renowned psychologist and clinical mediator, Dr. Marshall B. Rosenberg. This masterpiece is not about being passive, overly polite, or letting people walk all over you. It is a data-driven, high-status skill set designed to turn empathy and authentic self-expression into your ultimate interpersonal superpower. Rosenberg spent decades traveling to war zones, corporate boardrooms, and highly volatile domestic disputes all over the globe, discovering a profound, universal truth. Every single human behavior, no matter how aggressive, confusing, or toxic it appears on the surface, is an unpolished attempt to meet a core human need. Get incredibly comfortable. Eliminate all outside digital notifications. Grab a fresh notebook and let us discover how to master the 4 foundational pillars of nonviolent communication, so you can walk into any high-stress situation, disarm defensive behavior with absolute precision, and build unshakable bonds of trust and influence. Part 1. The Matrix of Moralistic Judgments and Life-Alienating Language. Let us begin our narrative by looking at the deep psychological programming that corrupts our daily conversations. Rosenberg introduces an unyielding premise that serves as the ultimate boundary line between a toxic relationship dynamic and a sovereign, empowering connection. He states that the vast majority of human beings speak a life-alienating language built entirely on a foundation of moralistic judgments. Imagine a typical interaction where someone behaves in a way that does not Align with your personal values or immediate desires. If your colleague takes longer than expected to complete a business report, your automatic internal programming instantly labels them as lazy, irresponsible, or incompetent. If your partner wants more emotional closeness than you are currently capable of giving, you label them as needy, dependent, or suffocating. Conversely, if you want more closeness than they are offering, you label them as cold, detached, or emotionally unavailable. This style of communication is an absolute trap. It is a primitive system based on classification and division, where we spend all our cognitive energy playing the role of a judge, pointing out what is wrong with the people around us. Rosenberg explains that when we express our values and desires through the lens of what is wrong with others, we actively guarantee that our own needs will never be met. The moment another human being senses even a tiny hint of blame, criticism, or diagnostic labeling in your voice, their nervous system treats the interaction as a direct, physical threat. To claim absolute social intelligence, you must recognize that moralistic judgments are nothing more than a tragic, distorted expression of your own unfulfilled needs. When you call someone selfish, what you are actually saying is that your need for consideration is currently being ignored. By shifting your mindset away from labeling who is right and who is wrong, you stop acting as an external prosecutor and start operating as a master of human psychology, opening the door to true interpersonal transformation. Part 2. The first pillar of mastery: pure observation, without evaluation. Now that we have mapped out the mental battlefield, let us look at the exact operational framework required to build an unshakable communicative presence. The very first pillar of the Rosenberg protocol is learning how to separate pure observation from personal evaluation. This sounds deceptively simple on the surface, but it requires an immense level of psychological discipline. The Indian philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti once noted that observing without evaluating is the highest form of human intelligence. The average person is completely incapable of doing this. When they look at a situation, their brain automatically merges what is actually happening with their own emotional biases, fears, and past traumas. For example, a manager might walk into an office, notice that an employee has not submitted their weekly data metrics, and say, "You are constantly procrastinating and avoiding your responsibilities." This statement is a heavy evaluation, wrapped in a blanket generalization. It is an opinion, not a fact. The moment the employee hears it, their prefrontal cortex shuts down, their defenses skyrocket, and they will naturally point out all the times they did not procrastinate, completely bypassing the actual core issue. An elite communicator uses the language of a high-resolution camera. They state the exact empirical facts of the situation with zero added commentary or emotional inflation. Instead of saying someone is a bad worker, they say, "I noticed that your weekly data metrics were not submitted by the 5 o'clock deadline yesterday." This statement is an unyielding, undeniable reality. It contains zero personal attacks, zero labels, and zero accusations. When you present a person with a clean, unpolished observation of reality, you remove their ability to argue with you. You provide a shared foundation of absolute truth from which a productive conversation can actually begin. Part 3. The second pillar of mastery: unlocking the vocabulary of authentic feeling. Our story now moves into a deep, psychological territory that exposes how modern society has completely disconnected us from our own emotional navigation systems. Rosenberg explains that from an early age, we are trained to be outer-directed rather than inner-directed. We are taught to think about what others expect us to say or do, rather than learning how to accurately identify and articulate what we are actually feeling inside. This emotional illiteracy creates a massive structural flaw in our relationships. When we attempt to express our feelings during a conflict, we almost always default to pseudo-feelings, which are actually hidden thoughts, evaluations, and accusations disguised as emotions. Think about how often you hear someone say phrases like, "I feel ignored," "I feel manipulated," "I feel betrayed," or "I feel misunderstood." Rosenberg pulls back the curtain to reveal a fascinating linguistic secret. These are not actual feelings. Words like ignored, manipulated, or betrayed describe what you think the other person is doing to you, not your own internal emotional state. If you tell your partner, "I feel ignored," you are subtly accusing them of neglecting you, which immediately forces them into a defensive, counterattacking posture. To break free from this cycle, you must learn to step entirely into your own skin and use the raw vocabulary of authentic feeling. Instead of saying, "I feel ignored," an elite communicator identifies the true emotional resonance inside their chest and says, "I feel lonely," "I feel anxious," or "I feel frustrated." By taking absolute personal ownership of your feelings and stripping away any linguistic reference to the other person's behavior, you project a massive aura of authentic vulnerability and personal sovereignty. You stop treating your emotions as weapons of war and start using them as clear, undeniable indicators of your internal state, completely disarming the defensive reflexes of the person across from you. Part 4. The third pillar of mastery: connecting emotional states to universal needs. Let us look at the absolute core engine of the entire nonviolent communication architecture, the deep connection between our internal feelings and our universal human needs. This is the exact coordinate where true personal freedom and emotional self-reliance are fully unlocked. Rosenberg introduces a revolutionary psychological law that will completely alter how you view human conflict. He states that other people's actions can act as an external stimulus for our feelings, but they are never the absolute cause of our feelings. Your emotional state is created entirely by how you choose to receive the situation and whether your own underlying human needs are currently being met or ignored. The general population operates from a baseline of emotional slavery. They believe that their happiness, anger, or sadness is dictated entirely by how the world treats them. If someone cuts them off in traffic or uses a harsh tone of voice, they assume that person made them angry. This mindset completely surrenders your personal power, turning you into a helpless, reactive puppet of your environment. A master of behavioral awareness understands that needs are the ultimate drivers of the human machine. Every single one of us shares a common set of universal needs, including the need for physical survival, autonomy, emotional safety, contribution, respect, and connection. When your needs are being met, you experience positive feelings like joy, peace, and excitement. When your needs are being ignored, you experience negative feelings like fear, irritation, and sadness. When you engage in a high-stakes interaction, you must form an internal link between your feelings and your needs. Instead of saying, "You made me angry when you arrived late," you say, "I feel frustrated because I have a deep need for predictability and respect for our shared time." This structural pivot completely alters the dynamic of the room. You are no longer holding the other person hostage for your emotional well-being. You are taking absolute responsibility for your own needs while cleanly explaining the psychological mechanism behind your discomfort, forcing the other person to look at the human reality of the situation rather than their own. Defensive shields. Part 5. The fourth pillar of mastery. Crafting the strategic, high-velocity request. Once you have cleanly observed the facts, identified your authentic feelings, and connected them to your universal needs, you must translate that internal awareness into direct, real-world action. This brings us to the fourth and final pillar of the Rosenberg playbook, the art of crafting a strategic, high-velocity request. Most people are completely incapable of asking for what they want in a clear, effective manner. They default to vague, abstract language, or they express their desires in terms of what they do not want. A habit that Rosenberg explains completely confuses the listener's brain. If you tell your colleague, "I need you to stop micromanaging me," you have stated a negative preference, leaving them completely in the dark about what specific behavior you actually want them to exhibit. Furthermore, people often use cosmic demands disguised as polite requests. A demand carries an implicit threat. If the other person does not comply with your wish, they will be punished, judged, criticized, or subjected to a guilt trip. The moment a conversation partner realizes that they do not have the autonomy to say no without facing emotional consequences, they will view your request as a hostage situation, triggering immediate resistance. 2. Execute a high-status request. You must use positive, concrete, action-oriented language that describes exactly what you want the other person to do in this precise coordinate in time. Instead of saying, "I want you to respect my boundaries," you say, "Would you be willing to check in with me via email before modifying the parameters of our joint project spreadsheet?" This request is perfectly clear, measurable, and highly actionable. Crucially, you must maintain the internal flexibility to accept a negative response with absolute composure and grace. If the other person says no, you do not launch into criticism or emotional manipulation. Instead, you view their refusal as a clear data signal that they have an underlying need of their own that is currently blocking their compliance, allowing you to seamlessly pivot into deep empathy to discover a mutually beneficial path forward. 6. The art of deep, empathic reception and disarming the aggressive critic. Our story now shifts from the art of authentic self-expression to the equally powerful art of deep empathic reception. How do you maintain your psychological composure and communication discipline when you are standing directly in the line of fire, facing an aggressive critic, an angry client, or a highly volatile family member? Rosenberg provides an elite tactical playbook for handling verbal assaults that completely reverses our natural survival instincts. When someone attacks you with harsh labels, insults, or intense judgment, your primitive amygdala immediately screams at you to do one of two things: defend your ego by fighting back, or accept the blame and retreat in shame. Both options are an absolute surrender of your personal power. An elite, nonviolent communicator uses a psychological strategy that can only be described as linguistic martial arts. They do not resist the attack. They completely step out of the way of the energy by shifting their absolute focus toward what the other person is feeling and needing under the surface of their rage. When someone yells at you, you are the most incompetent, uncaring leader I have ever worked with. A master listener does not hear the insult. They understand that the insult is nothing more than a tragic, clumsy, and uneducated scream of an unfulfilled human need. They look past the toxic mask, listen with deep cognitive empathy, and attempt to decode the underlying message, asking, "Are you feeling completely overwhelmed because your need for operational support and structural clarity is not being met?" This approach completely dismantles the momentum of aggression. You refuse to feed the conflict loop. When you reflect back their hidden feelings and needs without a single trace of sarcasm, defensiveness, or condescension, something incredible, happens inside the other person's nervous system. They experience a profound sense of psychological safety. They realize they do not need to yell to be heard, causing their anger to evaporate completely and allowing them to drop their protective shields so you can lead them toward a rational, collaborative solution. Part 7. The Sovereignty of Self-Compassion and Mourning Your Personal Mistakes as we move toward the pinnacle of personal excellence. We must turn this entire psychological framework inward to explore your relationship with your own internal monologue. Rosenberg explains that the single most important application of nonviolent communication is the cultivation of deep, unyielding self-compassion. We live in a culture that encourages us to run our lives through a relentless system of internal tyranny, self-blame, and chronic perfectionism. Think about the words you use in your own head when you make an operational error, lose a business account, or stumble in a relationship. Your inner critic immediately steps onto the stage, declaring phrases like, "How could you be so stupid? You always mess things up," or "You should have known better." Rosenberg exposes the phrase "should" as one of the most toxic, life-alienating words in human language. Every time we tell ourselves that we should do something, we are subjecting our mind to a form of internal coercion. We are acting out of guilt, shame, or fear of punishment, rather than operating from a position of conscious, joyful choice. To claim absolute sovereignty over your destiny, you must completely restructure how you process your personal failures. Replace your inner judge with a supportive, high-performance mentor. When you make a mistake, engage in a process Rosenberg calls empathic mourning. Instead of beating yourself up with shame, pause and look directly at your mistake with clean observation. Identify the authentic feelings of grief or frustration that arise from your error and connect them to the specific human needs that were left unfulfilled by your actions. Then, gently shift your attention to the underlying needs you were desperately trying to meet when you made that choice in the past. By understanding that even your worst mistakes were simply clumsy attempts to fulfill a legitimate human need, you heal the internal split in your psyche, releasing the heavy weight of regret and reclaiming your focus to execute your life's mission with absolute clarity, velocity, and power. Part 8. The Roadmap to Elite Connection and Lasting Global Impact. As our epic storytelling journey through the transformative life science of Dr. Marshall B. Rosenberg reaches its ultimate destination, let us step back and look at the entire architectural map of your newly engineered mind. Remember this final, unshakable truth. Nonviolent communication is not a soft, flowery communication style. It is the absolute foundation of human charisma, strategic leadership, and enduring global impact. Stop allowing the modern matrix of moralistic judgments, defensive reactions, and linguistic aggression to dilute the power of your character. Stop listening to the weak internal negotiations that force you to attack others with blame or retreat into the prison of self-shame and permanently retire the old communication models that keep your life trapped in a state of chronic conflict. Step into your authentic personal sovereignty. Today, re-engineer your daily conversations by strictly separating pure observation from personal evaluation. Articulate your feelings with absolute ownership using a raw emotional vocabulary, and anchor your stability by linking those feelings directly to your universal human needs. Craft your real-world desires into positive, action-oriented, concrete requests that respect human autonomy and disarm the aggressive critics in your life by tuning your ears exclusively to their underlying needs and vulnerabilities. Impose a strict culture of deep self-compassion over your internal monologue, transforming your mistakes into powerful data points for accelerated personal evolution. When you master the exact biological and psychological science of nonviolent communication, you permanently exit the matrix of social friction and emotional exhaustion. The illusions of social anxiety, communication breakdowns, and deep personal disconnects will fall away entirely from your presence. You will command absolute clarity over your corporate negotiations, build powerful ventures built on deep, unshakable human trust, protect your limited cognitive energy from the parasites of everyday static, and discover that your presence has transformed into a magnificent, unyielding beacon of relentless momentum, profound charisma, and lasting global success. What is the #1 nonviolent communication strategy from this psychological masterclass? Whether it is committing to state clean observations without adding evaluation, dropping pseudo-feelings to take total ownership of your internal emotional states, or disarming an aggressive interaction by focusing exclusively on the other person's hidden needs, that you are going to commit to practicing in your very next interaction today. Let me know your transformation and communication goals in the comments down below. If this deep dive storytelling summary completely re-engineered your approach to human charisma and handed you an elite architectural playbook for high-velocity influence and emotional resilience, show some incredible love by clicking that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another profound psychological, behavioral, science, or modern leadership book breakdown, and share this video with a colleague or friend who wants to elevate their personal presence today. Separate observation from evaluation. Take ownership of your needs. Lead with profound empathy, and I will see you in the next video.